everybody, and happy Leo full moon. For those of you who are new to this channel, my name is Bryan Colter, and I'm an evolutionary astrologer. And this is my take on the energy and how that's impacting the collective, but then also how we can work with these energies on a more personal level for our own evolution and growth. This Leo full moon is beautiful, it's fiery, it's majestic and passionate and creative. And of the entirety of 2024, I've pinpointed this specific lunar event happening on the 25th, this full moon, as one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, manifestation portal of this year. And it's for this reason that I'm launching a new channel, not an astrology channel, a channel dedicated to guided meditations. And as many of you know, I've been doing these astrological reports and then following that up with a guided meditation that helps us to leverage these energies through these meditative states. And people have really enjoyed it. It's been quite powerful, but I've felt compelled to separate these two things. And I'm creating a specific channel for those guided meditations. It's called Meditation Nexus. I'm going to put a link above and below. I encourage you to go there and subscribe if you've enjoyed my meditations. I'm going to increase the production value, better music, better quality of my voice, even better imagery on the screen for those of you who meditate with your eyes open. So I'm really excited about this. I'm going to dump a lot of my creative energy into this new channel. And I'm going to launch my first meditation on that channel on the 25th at 6 p.m. UK time. That specific time is very, very powerful. I'm going to stop doing the guided meditations on this channel and instead, with each one of these reports, point to that other channel and the corresponding meditation to whatever it is I'm talking about astrologically. So if you'd like to be notified when that first new video happens on the 25th, just hit the little notification bell when you subscribe. Now, pivoting back to the astrology. Before we get into this manifestation portal of this Leo full moon, first let's spend quite a bit of time talking more big picture, because we just had Pluto re-enter Aquarius, one of the biggest events of this year. It dipped its toes in Aquarius early last year, around March, I think it was. It spent a few months in that sign before it went retrograde and back into Capricorn. So that was a sneak preview of what really the next couple decades has in store for us. And it's been in Capricorn for some months, and now it's finally made its re-entrance into Aquarius. It re-entered on January 21st, where it will remain all the way until early September of this year, and then it will retrograde for the final time back into Capricorn until about mid-November there. And then in mid-November, it will re-enter Aquarius for the final time, where it will remain until 2043. Now, during that sneak peek of the last year, when it was in Aquarius, I said pay very special attention to what goes on during that period of time. And one of the most obvious things that happened was AI really became the talk of the town, so to speak. All of a sudden, everybody was talking about AI. There was some very interesting UFO disclosure stuff that started then, but I'm going to focus most of my attention on AI. And I got to say, the rate of change we're going to experience over the next 10 years is going to be mind-blowing. The world is going to change, and we're going to evolve more in the next 10 years than we have in the last 100 years, or maybe even 200 years. So hold on to your butts is the moral of the story, Now, we could really say 20 years, because Pluto's going to be in Aquarius until 2043. We could also say over the next 3 years, it's going to be really, really fast, because we have Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus all changing signs back to back to back in that 3-year period of time. But then the change will really be cemented, let's say, by 2026. The momentum has been gathered, and then the next 10 years, it's like, whoa. And then the 10 years beyond that, whoa. That's probably even double whoa, because the acceleration continues. The acceleration compounds. Now, being the Sagittarian that I am, I'm actually quite optimistic about the future we co-create as a collective. But let me just say, it's likely going to be a 5 to 15 year transition time. That's going to be a bit of a bumpy road, and there's going to be major bifurcations of people because of beliefs that are very much in polarity to each other. And these seeds of polarization were really sown over the last 3 years through all the hardship we've endured as a collective. And these seeds will continue to grow as we enter into this new mini age of Pluto in Aquarius. So yes, it will be a bit turbulent, to say the least. And 2024, I said in the last video, I really coined as the year of chaos. This year is going to be pretty wild. And that wild energy will extend out over the next couple decades for a variety of reasons, part of which we're going into hyperdrive speed levels of evolution, but then also the chaos because of that polarity consciousness driving us further and further apart. Now, this year in particular is one of the most important because just on a political level, this is the biggest election year in history, where we have like 40 or 42% of the human population going through an election year, a major election. And based on the outcomes of those elections and who enters into power will play a big role as we move forward with this Aquarian energy and point our noses in certain directions. Now, the future we co-create together, is it going to be a positive, love-based, compassionate, unity consciousness expression of our potential? Or are we going to co-create a more dystopian future, which is based on fear, greed, ego, pride, etc.? And it's always our choice. And this is on a personal level, of course, moment by moment and the decisions we make, but then us as a group of people. So what is the future we'll create? And I like to point to stories that have already been made. We do have the darker dystopian potentials, which I'm sure many astrologers are talking about. And I mentioned it in my last video. It's like Pluto in Aquarius brings about the extremes of that sign that it's in. And Aquarius, a big part of it is technology and a technological revolution. So it will bring out the extremes of that. And the extreme low end, the dark side of Aquarius, is that dystopia. The positive expression, the extreme on the other end of the polarity, is freedom within technology. We could call a techno-utopia, if you will. So Pluto highlighting the stark juxtaposition between light and dark of a dystopian future and a techno-utopia future. Now, if we point to the stories that have already been told about this, the dystopian variety would be something more like Blade Runner or Matrix or Mad Max or Waterworld, stuff like this. And on the more positive end of the spectrum, certainly not at the extreme level, because a lot of these movies, have a lot of darkness in them. We have, something like Elysium or Tomorrowland or Her or Ready Player One, which came out a few years ago. Now, there's very dark components of those movies as well, but they are more utopian than, let's say, Blade Runner. So it's more of the shades of gray in between. And then there's utopian futures that we probably haven't even thought of in our storytelling, which are also possible. Although if you look at the writing on the wall and see how we're doing with the energies now, it's hard to envision, the most beautiful, impeccable utopian future, but it is possible. And the meditation I'm releasing on my new channel, Meditation Nexus, is about visualizing a better future. I call it dream engineering. And it's a very powerful meditation to practice during this full moon and the 2 weeks beyond it. Really, to practice it indefinitely, because, of course, as most things go, the more effort you put in, the more powerful it will become. Where attention goes, energy flows. The power of our consciousness is amazing. But as we're entering into this election year, this major pivot point for humanity, we recognize that Pluto and Aquarius bringing out the extremes of technology, AI being the biggest part of this 2-decade shift. And really, we have the biggest areas of growth are going to be AI and longevity, as those seek to leverage technology to increase their lifespan. It will go way beyond AI and longevity, though. That's my prediction. Into things that are yet unknown. Massive, radical shifts in our understanding of physics, for example. And if that happens, our reality is blown wide open into a whole new galaxy, potentially. And then the world becomes unrecognizable. Part of the utopian side of this is free energy, etc. So as I said, I'm really quite optimistic about the future, and how we co-create that more techno-utopia depends on where we're at now, moment by moment, on a personal level. The energy we are rippling out into our external environment, for better or for worse. And if we really try day by day to raise our consciousness to this place of compassion and love and connection and freedom and unity, we're doing our own individual small part within the collective to co-create that better future, to bump ourselves on that more positive timeline. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the chart here so we can see what exactly is going on in the sky today. So as you can see, we have this beautiful Leo full moon. Of course, here we are squarely in the Aquarian season, Sun in Aquarius, right next to that Pluto re-entering that sign. There's going to be more to talk about even beyond this, but I do want to stay a bit longer with Aquarius, Pluto entering Aquarius, because it's so massive. Now, the sign of Aquarius has 2 planets that rule it. It has the planet Uranus and then the planet Saturn. So our understanding of these 2 sides of Aquarius will give us some new insights. So Uranus is more the rule breaker, freedom, liberation side of the Aquarian archetype. And I like to call it the archetype of the inventor, and inventors seek to create new things. And then on the other hand, we have the Saturnian side of the equation. And here I will invoke the archetype of the scientist. So the inventor, the Uranian side, and then the scientist, the more Saturnian side of Aquarius. Now, Saturn, represented as the planet of limitation, that's one side of it. We recognize the limitations associated with the archetype of the scientist. And if you think of a literal scientist, there's many limitations, but there's 2 big ones that come to mind. One of them is the scope of inquiry, right? Because science primarily deals with empirical and observable phenomena. And it's not very well suited for, subjects that fall outside the realm of the observable or the measurable, such as anything metaphysical or subjective experiences. So that's a big limit. And then another big limit is we are human, The other big limit is subjectivity and bias. That's part of science too. And any personal biases and preconceptions can influence the design, interpretation, and reporting of these scientific studies. Whereas the inventor archetype has limitations too, of course, but is there to try to create something new. And sometimes that creative inspiration enters into them, which is getting more into metaphysical talk, of course. So the future will co-create. Is it going to be a more uranium freedom-based future, or a more Saturnian, limited, controlling, with less imagination of a potential utopia we could co-create? Now, one key to manifesting the best possible timeline for us as a collective is freedom within technology. Now, I'm going to use a term here, borrow it from the world of software, open source. Now, open source is something Musk does with Twitter, where he releases all the code and whatnot, and some companies use open source to where it's free for everybody to use and learn from and to continue our process of evolution. And then, of course, there's closed source, where those ideas about the creative process are hidden from everybody else, which is the more Saturnian controlling element of this. So open source at its philosophical core embodies a profound ethos that transcends the mere development of software. It reflects a fundamental belief in the power of the collective human intellect and the democratic pursuit of knowledge. And at its heart, open source is a philosophy of transparency, collaboration, and shared progress. So the future we co-create, I love this idea of open source as a metaphor for entering into how we can co-create this future. Now, when I say philosophy of transparency, collaboration, and shared progress, that's very much the heart of healthy Aquarius as well. Because Aquarius, the 11th sign of the zodiac, has a lot of overlap in meaning with the 11th house in astrology, where the 11th house is known as the house of tribe, the house of friends, the house of the collective. So there is that part of Aquarius, which does have this more humanitarian impulse. Pluto entering Aquarius will bring out the extremes of that as well as the lifeblood of Aquarius, the rule breaker, which always seeks freedom at all costs. So here I'm, pointing it towards freedom within technology. But we just apply this across the board over the next couple decades, especially now as Pluto has re-entered Aquarius. Look for large groups of people coming together saying enough is enough. We've been seeing that over the last couple years, especially as Saturn and Aquarius squared each other, I think from 2021 to late 2022 or early 2023. That theme really starting to become obvious within the world. That's going to continue, and it's going to become more extreme, where people fight back against the controlling mechanisms of the world. So circling back to this idea of open source for a moment, it's a philosophy that encourages a departure from proprietary models that treat knowledge as a commodity, and it advocates for a world where information is a shared resource, fostering an environment where the barriers to entry are lowered for everybody, and innovation becomes a collective endeavor. This is a healthy, in air quotes, techno-utopian future, if we can really leverage that open source instead of a closed cipher. Now, there's a movie created, I think sometime last year, maybe the year before, by Dr. Stephen Greer, who's been in the UFO disclosure movement for quite some time. And I don't really believe everything he says, but I find his documentaries fascinating. And his recent one was called The Lost Century and How We Reclaim It. And he shows a lot of compelling evidence about inventors. We're on topic here, the Uranian side of Aquarius, where dozens and dozens of inventors created amazing new creations that would have benefited humanity. Many of them were free energy devices, etc. All of which were killed or died under very mysterious circumstances. And in the early 90s, Stephen Greer found some of these people, and he was telling stories in the movie, how he begged and pleaded for them to go open source with it, release it to the world. That's the only thing you can do here to save your life. And he begged and he pleaded with them. He said that all these inventors, same thing happened over and over and over again. They egoically and pridefully clutched and clinged to their creation because they wanted the patents. They wanted it to be part of their lineage. They wanted it to be part of their legacy. They wanted, of course, perhaps the money and the power that goes along with that as well. That makes me think of Gollum from The Lord of the Rings, the precious. They were holding on to this technology. It's the precious, and they would not let it go to open source. And they paid the consequence for their decision with their own lives. Now, whether or not you believe all the information in that documentary or not isn't the point. It still functions as a powerful message, almost a prophecy to where we're headed. Will we enter into this open source or a closed cipher? The choice is ours. Now, finally getting to this full moon, as I coined it, the portal of manifestation for 2024. We recognize, okay, here's the Leo full moon, square to Jupiter in Taurus. We also have Saturn in Pisces in a beautiful 60-degree angle sextile to that same Jupiter. And it's also sextile to Venus. Now, there's a lot going on here with these symbols, but let me just reduce it to one singular thing, which is sheer and utter creativity as one of the most powerful ways of working with these energies. Of course, we can get lost, we can stumble with these energies, which I'm not going to focus too much time on. If you want evidence of that, just look at the collective and some of the negative things that happens during this full moon. But to work with this on a personal level is to leverage creativity. Leo is known as the king of the beasts, which is king energy, queen energy. It's to roar like a lion. It's to practice vulnerability through self-expression. The only other planet, or really symbol in astrology that has the word king in it is Jupiter, which is in a square aspect to this Leo full moon. Jupiter's known as the king of the gods, so double king energy. And the king of the gods is the planet of expansion and faith and good luck. Here it is in Taurus, which goes by many names, but one of them is the musician, deeply creative sign as well. The question becomes, do we believe in ourselves enough to roar like a lion and to get beyond this fixed energy? Because Leo, Taurus, and Aquarius are all fixed signs. And the vulnerability to fixed signs is stubbornness, a refusal to adapt. So can we get beyond our own creative blocks, our stubborn creative blocks, and believe in ourselves enough to roar like a lion? That's the primary evolutionary question during this full moon event. Meanwhile, Saturn, in the visionary sign of Pisces, in a sextile to that same king, but also in a sextile to Venus, the goddess of the arts. All these symbols are related to creativity. Even Aquarius, as we talked about, is the inventor archetype. And Saturn is of this realm, of the density of this dimension. It wants to make real. It wants to concretize. Saturn in Pisces, can I concretize in some visible way, make my Piscean visionary imagination real in the world? So as you can see, this is a creative cocktail of energy, and we can leverage it to use our birthright, our soul energy, to create out in the world. Even if you don't consider yourself a very creative person, you are. Even if you're not classically drawn to the arts, every living moment, you're an artist. You're creating thoughts, you're creating motions, you're creating actions, you're creating the story of your life. So you ask yourself during this full moon, in what unique way can I roar like a lion? And how can I overcome my own creative blocks by believing in myself? Because the Jupiter evolutionary question is, how am I underestimating myself? And Jupiter also likes audacious action towards expansion. And if you have the audacity to believe in yourself and go in these more creative directions and whatever suits you best, that's when the magic of the so-called lucky planet Jupiter really gets activated. And you can see that manifest in your life. These are the core evolutionary intentions, with the goal being to expand our consciousness. Now, as I said before, I'm going to point you to the direction of my other YouTube channel for the guided meditation. Again, it will get officially launched during that beautiful portal time on the 25th at 6 p.m. UK. Take care.